Okay, we are live. Welcome to the Sacred Wellness Podcast, where healing meets transformation. I am your host, Terry Ann Russell, and today we will be doing a journey of self-discovery as we talk about shame and sexuality. My guest today has a powerful voice. Her name is Keegan. She's a truth teller, unafraid to go where the silence has lived for too long. We are opening from history to her story. Together, we're going to explore how shame has historically silenced the feminine and how it continues to shape our inner world and what it means to awaken into the sacred and sovereign sexuality today. So, Keegan, welcome to the show.
Hello, hello, hello. I'm so happy to be here again and talking about this topic because it's so important.
Me too. Let's jump right in. I'm looking for my pen. I have taken some notes here. I want to start a little bit by going back in time. Discuss a couple of time periods that I feel were really oppression. There was deep oppression for women. And one of those that I align with or I resonate with is the Victorian era. So sexuality was deeply repressed, especially for women. I feel like women's, her whole success or work was determined by her virginity. And her duty was really just to bear children, right? She was looked at as sort of an object to just for that purpose. And I think a lot of those imprints still live in our bodies and our beliefs that we have today. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, especially the idea how you brought up they were just for child rearing, and the fact that one of the most important things we can do is to create life in this world should create some kind of honor or sacredness around that, and the fact that that was weaponized against women, I think really started the oppression and the shame surrounding the womb and, you know, our sexuality and what it does. We were even shamed because even those times, if a man came on to you, it was crazy.
It was your fault.
It was your fault. Yeah. How dare you be so beautiful?
Well, it's that or what you wore or what you were doing, right? And still, I think a lot of that is still prevalent today, right?
Yeah. And then to throw women away if they couldn't bear children, and to know now, like, all the sacredness around that and all the energy around it, it's like, yeah, no crap. They couldn't bear children. Look what you were doing to them.
Or no wonder they didn't want to have sex with you. You wonder why.
Yeah. You're barbarians.
But just even those tight corsets, I remember like looking at those and going, oh my gosh, those must be like so uncomfortable. Could you imagine?
And how can you
like, yeah, the essence of your core breathing.
Yeah, some of us, we wear these things on our chest that are heavy already, and then to be squeezed up all in it, I don't even know how I would breathe.
I mean, we laugh about it, but it is really true. I mean, there's so much shame that's prevalent today. And
well, there's even a sad story behind the corsets. They say it was a device of oppression because you couldn't run. That's why they kept their dresses heavy and them tightly corseted, because they couldn't run away.
Wow.
Like that's, and like to think about it on that deep of a level too. And even in ancient culture, in Chinese cultures and stuff, they bound women's feet so they couldn't run away, and they called it beauty and that tradition.
Yeah, and that was supposedly to keep their feet small.
Mm-hmm. But really, it was so you couldn't run away.
Wow. All these things we're talking about, they really like bring up an inner anger for me. I'll need to look at that and see a lot of what that's about for me. What our topic is today is really about shame and guilt and the difference between the two, and how it's been shameful to even discuss anything around sexuality. First, I want to say that shame versus guilt. So guilt is like I did something bad versus shame, whereas I am bad.
Mhm.
So a lot of us feel the shame aspect of any sexuality that we want to be involved in, right? Or even the sexuality or the sensuality of who we are as women, right?
Mhm.
That's been brought up, you know, numerous times as we've been sort of, even these last 2000 years, you look at this and so much has changed, but yet nothing has changed.
Yes. And like even from the time we're little growing up, starting from something that's so natural for us, our menstrual cycle, right? We're shamed in that. We're made that it's disgusting. We're made to feel embarrassed by it even. And embarrassment has a deep root with shame as well. Anything that we might be embarrassed around could create shame or create a sense of shame. And I think that it starts there, and it's not something a girl can control. It's hormonal, it's natural, it's it's something that's necessary. And even that part of us is shamed. We've come a long way. We have men now going to the grocery store and picking up tampons and pads, and we have come a long way, but there's still this shame in it, and there's still this um embarrassment around it, instead of this celebration. And it really should be a celebration. It marks your cycle, it marks your alignment to the earth and your alignment with the moons of the earth.
Mhm.
And it marks the fact that you can now raise children and bear children, and that you're entering womanhood. It's the maiden energy entering your body and really aligning you for your life. And there's so much shame rooted right in the origin of that. And that's so we are cyclic. That's what women are. We're four
Yeah.
beast on a cyclic nature of 13. Those are facts. And how we connect with that is truly powerful, but we're so shamed by it. So imagine from the get-go shamed by something that you naturally can't control.
Yeah. Well, and that's like the sexual urge too. You know, I remember somebody
Mhm.
saying to me, "Just tell them don't do it." And I'm like drugs. Remember the slogan, "Don't do drugs"? It's not like
Yes.
drugs. It's
No,
perfectly natural.
exactly, and your hormones are going. And if you look in nature, when animals even are coming into their hormonal maturity and things like that, they start rubbing themselves on things. They start rubbing themselves on each other. They start experimenting in that nature, because it's natural. Like that is how our evolution continues, is sex. And it's how we can connect with each other on such a sacred level and such a deep level. And it's also how we can really punish people and traumatize people. It has these two very wide aspects. And to have any kind of shame or embarrassment around it is just not going to be healthy. And it leads to a lot of the problems and things that we're seeing in the world. It is very deep rooted in shame and our sexuality.
Yeah, and it's
And
for
not
both
just
men
for
and women.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Not just for women. Because also, I think men have sex thrown at them too young, because it's okay in our society for a man to masturbate. If a little teenage girl is running around talking about masturbation, we're like, "Oh my god." Ah! And if a little boy's running around, we're like high-fiving him
Yeah.
and giving him secrets or something. It's like, why is one shamed and the other exploited almost? Because I don't think it's right to do that to guys either. I
Right.
think it's something that should be taught to be more sacred and respectful and more like a temple.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. You know, I feel like there's been this like long-lasting guilt when it comes to the expression of our sexuality. And it's deeply embedded and it goes back generations and generations. And now us in the generation that we're in, and us being sort of the curse breakers and changing all those generational curses, we're really speaking, and we're speaking loud, and we're speaking deeply about deeply rooted issues in both men and women. So when we talk about the divine feminine or the sacred feminine, it involves also the sacred masculine. You
It
know,
does.
this aspect, this separateness that's been created is also another diversion for us. And so when we talk about the feminine, we also are talking about the masculine, as you just said. I mean, it shouldn't be okay for boys and not for girls, or it
Right.
shouldn't be okay for anyone that young. I mean, I'm just even disgusted at like the clothes you see in Target for babies that have the sides of the stomach cut out of the sides that,
Mhm.
a young woman would wear. I mean, why are you showing a baby side? Like, I don't remember ever having bathing suits like that.
No, and I think it's like robbing so much creation and so much sacredness because you're not you're not aware of the layers, I think, of sexuality. I think the important part of coming into who you are and things like that is that is an aspect of yourself that you have to find, your sexuality is an aspect of yourself you have to find. And it comes with an internal drive too, and if you are uncomfortable sharing your body, let's just say, and you are forced to wear these clothes because of fashion, or you're forced to wear these clothes to fit in or whatever, then is that not developing a part of you that will give yourself away to fit in, or give yourself away because you don't have the power to say no, or give yourself away because it's just what is normal and you're ignoring that voice within?
Yeah.
But
I
then
think
there are
that's
some
that's
people
a
that
great
are
point.
comfortable.
Yeah, that's a great point, ignoring the voice within. That happens in so many aspects of who we are and what we do, and we not only try to repress that voice, right? We don't even ask it or give it the awareness or the love or attention that it needs when it's coming up for us. Why do we feel like that? Is there something within ourselves? And when you look deeply into what that is for you specifically, because it's different for everybody, right? We're not
Yes,
just
it is.
layering one layer here and saying,
No,
this is the way it is for everybody, because it's different based on what type of experiences you've had, how you've been raised. Were you religious? Were you brought up in a strict religion that prohibited this stuff? So
yeah,
everybody's view is going to be different about what we're saying today.
and everyone excitement threshold is different too, like what stimulates people and what turns people on and things like that. And so there's no box that anyone can fit in because it's all based on experience and what you've gone through in your life. And there's generality in it, yeah, but the thing that we are all common in is the shame around it. Like, we can't even talk deeply about desires, or we can't really talk about, traumas around sex, or we can't talk about, problems around sex, or, even great sex. People are intimidated to talk about great sex, that they're having great sex, the greatest sex of their life. And it's like, why? That is such It's our kundalini energy, it's our creative life force. It is something so powerful. We literally create from it. So, like, why are
Yeah,
we
and
shamed by it?
you think that's why a lot of us are oppressed in our creativity nowadays, huh?
I do. I think it's because, creativity can start here in our mind, but we can also create um from our sexual organs, it with the energy, and we can physically create. We can bring life into this earth. And I think that society has set it up that we've taken the imagination too young from the mind, and we've put it down into our root, and we've given it a face, and we've given it a name, and we've given it titles, and we've given it all these things, and there is no creativity there. There is no finding yourself there. Like, it's all these extremes instead of aloneness and like encouragement around it.
Yeah, I like that. I think that as we delve a little bit deeper into some practices or rituals that help us sort of release shame, I think that's going to be
Hmm.
very helpful for a lot of people, because it doesn't only it's not only held within our physical body, right? But then we also have our lineage. We
Yes.
also have the mental and the emotional aspect of it. And then we have the soul's aspect of it, right? Because our soul has lived before. So our soul has had these experiences, maybe
Exactly.
during the Victorian era, as I'm drawn to. Um, so we have all of these things into one. And like I said, for everybody, it's so different. So there's different practices and different rituals. And where you'll feel that shame in your body can be different as well. You know, the generality when I speak about it is usually shame is held in the lower back. So if you manifest with lower back pain, a lot of times your shame is held there. But that's a general thing. You know, people can hold it in other areas of their body as well.
Mhm. They could have been trespassed somewhere, and that's where they hold it, you know? And I think that, like, we're expanding, more and more now to different practices and different rituals to open us up, you know? And I just see, like, some even older generations, how they're responding to that, you know? If we do these sensual dances and we're having these empowerment dances where you and I have practiced that. We participate in goddess dances and we move our body and we use our sensuality and create that energy and replace it with something honorable and sacred instead of shame, you know, because older generations would see you dance like that and say, what is wrong with you, why are you being a hussy, and you know, don't do that. And it's like, why, I don't even know about sex yet, what are you yelling at me for, I'm just moving my body because this feels good, you know. And then we learn about somatic exercise, and twerking and things like that is so powerful in releasing trauma from the hips and releasing trauma from the womb and the root and moving the energy through the body. And it's like we were shamed doing something so natural. Like our bodies were telling us what to do. Our bodies were telling us to move and thrust and do these things because the energy needed to move, and we're shamed. Don't do that. It's bad. It's bad. It's like, why is it bad? You do
Based
it.
on their conditioning or their beliefs about that, right? So often as a young child, we are very aware of not only our body, but also the aspects of ourself that are spiritual aspects or emotional aspects. And we often do, you know, what we like or who we are. You know, a perfect example, I was talking to a woman before you about my human design and how I used to quit things as a child, and I would get, oh, you quit everything, you never finish or follow through. But that's part of my human design chart now, you know, and so it's like, well, that makes perfect sense then why I quit things and never finished.
Yeah,
So
I was supposed to learn little things and move along, learn little things and move along because it was for a greater picture. It wasn't for this is your lane, stay in it.
yeah, this is your box. You fit into it and keep your mouth quiet and don't talk
Yeah.
and just stay in your little box.
No, no, no. Not any more of that. Not any more of that.
You know, one thing I love about somatic exercise or somatic practices, and I just talked about this on my show the other day, is not only the powerfulness behind it, but how you can literally feel within your body. Like, because my hips are so tight and because I've had 6 pregnancies and I have 3 children, you know, my body has also had a lot of trauma in my hips and my pelvic area. So when I started somatic healing or somatic movement, it was like a coming home. My body recognized that as this
Mhm.
powerful practice that it could use to sort of release some of that. Um, you want to share a little bit about how you've sort of experienced that when you've done somatic exercises?
Yeah, I think for me, it was a big healing of the inner child. So I experienced sexual trauma from a child, from age 3 to about 10, when I realized what was happening because you're learning different things in school and stuff like that. So for me, I think that I was aware of sexuality, but I wasn't aware of the layers of sexuality. Does that make sense? So I was aware of feelings in my body and things like this, but I wasn't aware of what that is. I was a child, you know? And so I think somatic exercises brought back a lot of shame around that, but it wasn't in a way that was harmful. It was in a way that I had control. It was for me, and it was controlled by me, and it was powered by me and what I was thinking and what I was feeling. And it brought this like freedom back of like being a little kid and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. And you just like feel everything go away around you, you know, and you feel your body and you feel the earth spinning. And that's the only way I can describe it. And what happened is this became powerful because it was like when you are, this is just my experience, when you're exposed to sex at a young age, I think, then you don't learn what you like until later when you learn the
Right.
layers, you know? And I think when you get to come into age and then come into all those things, I think it's a little bit different of a path. So just for me in general, it's just a different path. But the trauma around that sometimes you can't explain because you're not stuck on it. You were a child, but
Yeah.
your body remembers it. Like, I went through therapy, I went through healing, I understand that it's not me. I shouldn't have shame and guilt. My mind understands that, but there's still things in my body, and maybe certain movements and certain touches that I'm not consciously aware of is turning my body rigid and turning my body off. And somatic exercise took away that control but gave the control, because it awakens these things and it gives
Mhm.
you this power that you thought came from an outside source or you thought came from an outside world when you held the power the whole time.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, that's so powerful.
I remember being a little girl and growing breast and my hips changing, and I was changing, and men started looking at me, and some girls get to be like, "Ooh," I was like immediately shameful, like, "Oh God, what's this gonna bring?" Ugh, you know?
Right.
And so those kinds of things were like had to be done in private and more private. I didn't like the eye on me. I thought that was bad. I thought that was something bad. When if I was powerful in that, man, my life would be different. Because there's
Absolutely,
so much power in that, especially if you know your body and you know yourself and you don't just give it away. There's so
Right.
much power.
Yeah, there's so much layers just in there in which you spoke of, the layering of the power, the layering
Mhm.
of developing at such a young age. I also developed at a young age, and I did not want to be seen as different from
Mm.
anybody else, but I was noticed right away, and I've had that sort of attention on me my entire life. So, and because I'm small too, I've had to learn to use my voice to sort of, because I'm not intimidating when you look at me, but I have to open my mouth to make sure that you understand that I can be intimidating. So to step away and don't encroach in my space. That was sort of my defense mechanism, as well as carrying extra weight in my hips and my lower
Yeah.
body, my thighs,
Well, too, we talked
because
about that. And we talked about last time too that masculine energy. So then you're also being put into that masculine stance of defense when you're coming into womanhood. That's like counteractive to what you're supposed to be experiencing.
yeah. Yeah, like the whole sense of it all, it totally messes with your friggin' puberty at that time because I feel like it's supposed to be a time that's supposed to be revered and you should be, experiencing this without any shame or guilt. But here we are and we're
Exactly.
all going through this. And I think for young children now, I don't even want to go there because, when I came up,
Too much exposure.
there is so much
It's giving
exposure.
it's giving the mind imagination that it wouldn't naturally come up with, and that's my problem with it. You can't, like, we can talk all day about, like, "Oh, what are you saying? You're not supposed to talk about sex with teens and blah blah blah." No. What I'm saying is there's too much exposure, and you're putting things in the mind that would not naturally be there, and you're creating scenarios that would not naturally be there. And so the level of discovery that they're having is not anything natural of the imagination. And I feel it's creating trauma and layers of trauma just in that itself,
Right. That
because
that
then you're
years later
trying.
now, when they're 35, 40, 45, they'll be discovering this unlayering that I call it and say, "Oh, wow, that wasn't very natural." Because that was
No,
something. I mean, if you think about it, right? When I think about my third eye and how when you stare at a bright light or you stare at a screen and you're given these image, it's embedded deeply within your third eye. And if you close your eyes, you can see it through your third eye. That is so not only manipulative, but it's
yes,
deeply embedded in that child then to understand this. Whereas when I grew up in the 70s, you didn't see stuff like that. We barely had HBO where you could see anything.
Right.
but now it's so prevalent and it's everywhere, and they have access to it, and it just pops up. They don't even have to be looking for anything, but because there's all these different types of people out there, they're able to
Mhm.
pop it in there however they do it.
Or because somebody mentioned something and then it's curiosity, and then maybe you weren't even ready for that yet. And now you're traumatized by it. And now you're scared of something you don't even understand.
Yeah.
And then that's a whole nother layer of shame. And then how are you going to talk about it? You're going to get in trouble.
Yeah, but especially
Or
if you have parents that are more closed off. That's why I want to talk about how can we as women teach our children to begin to explore their sensuality without fear, without any, fear of repercussions or shame or guilt. How can we help our young women, even our young men, begin to explore their sexuality without this? I feel like it really begins with us and being able to speak about that stuff, because I know when I was coming up, nobody wanted to speak about sex.
or it was just that's what you do with marriage. If you have sex, you'll get pregnant. If a penis touches you, you'll get pregnant. Like, what? What?
If you look at it, you'll get pregnant. And I was like
Yeah.
that. If you look at me, I became pregnant. Let me tell you. I was very
you
fertile and
you were
became
the
pregnant
fertile
very
myrtles.
young.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
fertile myrtle. Well, I have
But,
a theory behind that.
do
How
you?
we can help them, I think, is getting them in tune with that inner voice at a young age, before any of those hormones even kick in. So if you are in the ability to do that, like if you are raising really, really young children, I personally think that's the best intervention. You start teaching them young to listen to that inner voice. And then I think once they can establish that, and even with teenagers, start asking them questions about their inner voice, like, well, what did that situation make you feel like? And how did that person make you feel? And things like that. And start really like internalizing that again and putting that back in. And then I think it makes room for them to see as they're experimenting, like, hey, I don't like this. This doesn't feel good. And I am safe to say, no, I don't want this. And my body is worth it. And, what I feel is worth it, or what I want. And I think that the younger we can implement that and stop shaming them, like even about going to the bathroom, when they're potty training and things like that, if they have an accident, we're yelling at them. And it's just like everything around the root, everything around their sexual organs has been shamed, like even from potty training, but you're so aware of it. It's crazy. And I think that as uncomfortable as it is, I think that we should encourage them to seek self exploration with their own bodies, before they seek exploration with another person,
Mhm.
and to seek that exploration on the internet and things like that. I think that they should explore their bodies, feel their bodies, and see what feels good.
Yeah, you made a lot of great points, and I think worth ties into almost every aspect of our
Yes.
life, everywhere we go, every day. And if we don't have that sense of self-worth, we let people walk all over us, or we let people, our friends, treat us badly. We've lost that sense of self-worth already. And then you move it into the area of sex, and it becomes so detrimental, especially the younger you are that you're having sex, right? They
Mhm.
don't understand. I mean, they say your prefrontal cortex isn't developed till you're 25. So imagine these
Right.
13-year-olds that are out there having sex and not understanding any complications or anything
One's
that
getting
ties into
pregnant,
their self-worth. Yeah.
and the
I
amount of
think
teen
it's
pregnancy.
scary.
It is
Yeah.
scary. And majority of teen pregnancy is not a want of a child, it's a want of love.
Yes.
They're having sex because they don't have connection. That is the only time they're feeling something with an individual. And so sex isn't even a sacred thing. It's a temporary high for a very empty feeling a lot of times, because there was no self-exploration.
And we look at that with negative attention as well, right? So if a kid's getting in trouble by being bad at school, they're looking for that attention. They don't know how to get positive reinforcements, but they'll get negative reinforcement. And that ties
Or
into exactly what you said.
or we create the positive reinforcement out of the negative, because if we're always told we're bad, or if we're always told we're a slut, let's just say, or a hussy because you want to wear makeup and you came up in a generation where that wasn't right, like your mother didn't approve of you wearing makeup, let's just say, then when you learn what a slut is, or a hussy is, you might become your own self-fulfilling prophecy, because that's what you were told you were. So you'll create situations and scenarios where that's exactly what you are, because you are then creating a positive reinforcement. You are validating what you've been told. You're validating the truth that's been put onto you.
Yeah. And that's another part of it. I think people don't go deeply into themselves enough and look at that. Where is that within you? And I think if we spent more time, not only with our bodies and learning about our bodies as young children, but learning to meditate, learning to go
Yeah,
within and explore that inner sanctum of ourselves. And it brings us just a whole new awareness. It helps us to learn our powerful voice within us, right? And then we want to project that out into the world.
we do. And we also want that sense of belonging, right? And I just don't know where in society we have put sexuality in with social, like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, when did we put sexuality as a way of acceptance? You know what I mean? Where did it leave the private sacred self and become this public thing to be picked upon, or criticized, or put on a pedestal, or picked apart? When did that switch happen? Because I think that's not right either, and we need to bring it back down to that sacred talk.
Yeah.
It
I
doesn't
want to
have
talk
to
a
do
little
anything
bit about, go
like
ahead.
that. Sorry, I'm not saying that has to do anything with religion when I say sacred talk. I just mean that self-worth. Like, you are a temple. Like, what enters you, or what you put onto your temple, has an effect.
I
You
wish
don't
I
just
would have
open,
known. I wish somebody would have told me that 50 years
right?
ago.
Because I knew I had the power, but the women around me really made me feel like that power that I possessed was bad. That charisma, that sexuality, the fact that I could walk into a room and change the energy of the room. Like, I saw that I could do that as at a young age, but I thought that was bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't encouraged. It was like, hey, put a sheet on that. Stop. You know what I mean? They
Just
were
flush it down,
scared of
huh?
it. Yeah, you're scared of it. Some people are scared. They're scared of what that brings, and they're scared of what that can manipulate.
Yeah. Part of what I do in the world of energy healing and releasing stuck energy and ancestral healing is looking at all the chakras, but the sacral chakra in particular is what I want to talk about. We touched upon it with the creativity, but sexuality is such a core part of our overall wellness, right? I think a lot of us don't look at that when we're looking at our wellness, right? We'll look at, oh, hey, I need to eat better. I need to,
Yeah.
exercise more. But nobody ever says, well, you need to have more sex, or you need to have better sex, or you need to learn how to connect with your sacral chakra, so
Yeah.
that your sex life is not only better, but then that streams out into the creativity in your life and the creator. That creator's been squashed, and we have those layers of stuck energy there. It keeps us stagnant. Moving into that new space that we're going into, where the divine feminine is beginning to rise, use their voice, use their powers that they have. There is going to be a lot of fear again that fights against that. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that we're seeing it already with a lot of the manipulation of feminism. and the groups that they try to place everyone in, instead of just this is woman, this is the divine feminine. I think that we're seeing this challenge of the sexes, I like to call it, because of this. I think they're afraid of the divine feminine, because the divine feminine is coming in powerful, and she's coming in sexy, and she's coming in with fire, and she's coming in and she looks like a mother, and she looks like a wife, and she looks like a caretaker, and she looks like a nurturer, and she looks like a protector, and it is nothing of these frail women that have to be saved. But yet these men are rising to the occasion to defend this new divine feminine that is so necessary for what society is going through right now and what we're going to see in the future,
Yeah.
And I think that is very intimidating to the minds at be that want to control things and siphon our energies, And I think that power that we possess for the divine masculine is why we are so oppressed, because we rise an energy within men that creates that warrior that wants to defend and wants to protect and wants to raise children and create life on earth. They do. It raises this different energy.
Yeah. And when you feel that within yourself, right? That's a lot of what I talk about, is not only the divine feminine, but the divine masculine within us. And how do we come into balance with that? Because when we can come into balance with ourselves in all areas, then we can come into balance on the outside. And as more of us are coming into balance within ourselves, we're creating that, right? Our intuition is becoming stronger. I'm
Mhm.
noticing a lot more people are in touch with what they're hearing, seeing, knowing, and feeling. And so that has been another aspect of all of this, that the powers that be do not want us to get into that level of intuition and understanding what that inner means for us.
Exactly. Can you imagine, like, I was just talking to you about this morning in my journaling. Can you imagine a society of women that were synced to the moon, and they worked based off of their 4 beast a month? And I'll call it beast. We have these 4 energies that it's scientific. Like, our hormones change 4 times in a month. We have different phases. We very much are in sync with the cyclic nature of the months of the calendar, except we should have 13 because we have 13 moons, but we'll talk about that on a different show. um, could you imagine a society of women that worked based on their phases? So, they weren't tired because they were doing the brunt of their work when they had the most energy in that month. They're not stressed out and angry because they have that pause for the crone, and they have the pause for the bleed to rest the body and let the knowledge integrate into the body from the month and from the cycle. And if you're a mother, like, what would that look like if you had this time to nurture in the best times of nurture, and then create structure when you are needing the structure, within that phase? Imagine if we were so in tune with how we cycle within our hormones, that that's how our life worked. you wouldn't have you wouldn't have so much trauma happening, because you wouldn't see all of these tired people, tired women, stressed out women, divine masculine women wanting to give up women. They would be seated in who they are, and their life would reflect that. It would really reflect it. You would see the cycle and the phase change within their life, and their husband would be able to honor it. They would be able to see it as well and pick up slack. Like, hey, I know this week she's down. This is my week to come in, but I know the other 3 weeks of the month, she's got it.
Right.
What would that look like with partnership too, if that was like honored?
Yeah, I think it would be amazing. I know a lot of women in the spiritual realm of the work that we do now. They are much more in tune with that. And you'll hear people say, and I've been one of them, I'm not going to work when I'm on my cycle. It's just too depleting for my energy to
Yeah,
output all of that care and nurturing for everybody else that I should be giving to myself. So I think that
exactly.
shift has started to come in, and what that looks like for us is, I think it's amazing, because I'm like, oh, this is great. Where was this when I was starting, because my periods were
Yeah.
so bad and so heavy. I mean, I wish somebody would have told me take the week off and don't work. It would have been perfect, right? Just to nurture
I know
myself and give myself that time.
exactly. And, like, it doesn't have to be like, I think people have this misconception too that, oh, when you have your cycle or you're menstruating, that you need to just be laying in a bed and doing nothing. Just no. What if you could just ground yourself at home and you had those 5 to 7 days to get caught up on housework and watch a couple of shows and maybe do the journal entries that you put aside and get that corner cleaned out of the house and just have that moment, like that moment of time that pauses to allow your body to rest and be with itself. Don't answer the phone for other people and listen to their problems. Answer the emails that you've been putting off because you're sitting there and you can. You know what I mean? Like, do the work on your website that you've been avoiding. Make the phone calls you've been avoiding. Like, that's what the rest time is about, because nurturing yourself just isn't a physical thing. It's also taking care of our matrix shit too.
Yeah, and then let's go one step further with that. And how about surrounding ourselves with beautiful, supportive, loving, caring women while we're in that space to sort of help us through those transitions? Because I'll tell you, I mean, it's not easy. You know, the amount of bleeding. I mean, I'm sure I could have died a million times over by the amount of blood that that I've lost in this lifetime. So, you know, and I'm making light of it, but it's serious in the way that it's like, you know, it hasn't been given enough credit because it's
No.
just something so natural. But yes, some women do struggle more with the
Hmm.
symptoms of having a cycle, and having that group of supporting, loving women around you to nurture you when you can't nurture yourself, or maybe you are too weak and you've lost too much blood and you need nurturing from an outside source. That's like the perfect scenario in my head.
Me too. But again, that starts with that internal journey. We need to educate each other. We need to educate women younger and younger about, like, even those phases within ourselves, so we can properly eat, we can properly plan our lives. And if our minds, I think, were surrounded in that kind of imagination and creation before we're fed sexuality, I think even sexuality would look a lot different, and it would be more comfortable and it would be more loving and unconditional instead of so much taboo and darkness, you know?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
even that's been hijacked and perverted in so many ways.
Yeah. You know, I think we could probably talk all day. Tell me a little bit more about your journaling this morning.
So, that's what I was talking about, the different phases that we go through and how, even the earth is representational of that. Like, the earth goes through 4 seasons, just we're just faster. We see it monthly. We see this 4-stage return monthly. But I think our energy matches the earth, you know, our first stage of our cycle, we're the maiden, that spring energy. We have all of this energy. We can take on the world. We make all these plans. Usually we make the plans for when we have our periods and then we don't want to do it and we look like flakes. But but it's when you have all this energy and you can take on the world, and it's that spring energy. And then, you know, the second week of your phase, you are in that mothering energy, that summer energy where you are free to nurture. You're letting things be free to be, you know. You've planted all these seeds, you're watching them grow. And we see that reflective in summer, you know. Summer is so abundant, things get wild, you know, all the bugs are out, everything's growing, everything's abundant. And then, you know, our third phase, we get that fire, that enchantress phase, because it all goes with the goddesses and everything. And you get that fire because it's the fall. It's like, hey, back to routine. We need structure. You can't be crazy. We can't have all this chaos. I need to get ready because I'm going to bleed soon. And it's like we have these energies and they're exactly mirroring the earth. And we have to pay attention to this because I think that is our inner voice too. I think that when you see this and you can watch it within yourself and then you can see it reflected in your environment, then it makes you more empowered as a woman. You see the creator within you. You see earth within you, you know? And I think it's a divine power that makes you have a voice and it makes you have something sacred.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about the moon, because the moon cycles and how that works with our cycle. I'm always amazed. I mean, when I first learned about moon cycles and then my cycle, oh, I always thought it was like this weird coincidence that I would get my cycle on a full moon. It was like, that's so weird,
Yeah,
but I had no knowledge of anything back then, I'll say.
it is incredible, and a lot of women that are in tune with their cycle will notice they'll switch. Um, Half of the year they'll be full moon bleeders, and another half of the year they'll be um, new moon bleeders. And I think it's powerful because it's the energy that your body is in too, and it's a representation of the phases. And it reminds you that it's okay that you are always going to be in different phases, and it's how you work with the energy of those phases. And if you follow the moon, you have different phases of the moon and they're used for different energy work. When we're releasing and getting rid of things, we're using that full moon energy to shed and disperse of everything we've collected in the phases of the moon all month. And we're going back and forth constantly, just like the moon. The moon is going around the earth back and forth constantly.
Right. Yeah.
It's okay, it's okay to have downtime. And we don't rest, and then we don't, because we don't rest, we can't enjoy that sacred new energy either of rebirth every month.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. We don't rest. And in our
Mm-mm.
society, we go, go, go. And it's always at the detriment of ourselves. I mean, I can remember run, run, run. And there was no, settling down or taking rest time or downtime. There was nothing.
Or I remember as a kid, I couldn't sit. I remember, like, if I was sitting, it was like you were lazy. There was something that could be done around the house. There was something
Yes.
that could be done. Get up. What are you sitting for? There's something that could be done. And so I think a lot of it for me was really sitting and healing that part of myself and forcing myself to sit down. And I started with little exercises where I would be doing something like crocheting because I'm still doing something while I'm sitting. And
Right.
now back to somatic exercises that forced me to sit and do something for me instead of, oh, I could sit and paint and do something for my business. I could sit and crochet and do something here for my business and sit and do this and sit and do that. That's not rest.
Yeah.
Because
It's not.
you're sitting does not mean you're resting.
No. I wonder really what a healed, because I feel like this journey, we're always healing, right? And it's a process that we're going through um, as we live out our life on earth and in the body that we're in now. But our physical bodies are, and I know mine for sure has been taken for granted. I've not
Yeah.
connected with my physical body the way I've needed to. So I really wonder, like, what does an integrated sense of sacred sexuality look like to you? If you had to have like the picture perfect of a healed, integrated self of sexual sacred sexuality, what would it look like?
I don't know, because I'm always healing too. And I think that
I know
all of our
that's a double
layers.
layered question too.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, and all of our layers, I know we always talk about like child traumas and things like that, but not all of our layers come from that. Other times in life where we sacrifice ourselves or give our bodies when we don't want to. Um, Even being in relationships, as a woman and thinking like, oh, this is my boyfriend. I don't feel like having sex right now, but I'm going to because he's my boyfriend. How can I say no? Or things like that. So I think we have traumas that build around our sexuality. But I think for me, like a completely healed version of myself would be able to express um, without any kind of judgment all things, because just like our taste in food changes and our lives change, sexuality changes too.
Mhm.
And I think that a completely healed person, ooh, this might be like a little taboo, but I don't think you should be restricted. So like if you feel like a connection with somebody and you feel you want that healing sacred energy with somebody, you should be able to explore that and see where that leads you, without attachments and traumas and taboo. And that doesn't always mean penetration, and that doesn't always mean literal sex. That means intimacy. If you are really connecting with somebody on an emotional level, that can do the same for your body as an orgasm, that can do the
Yeah.
same.
And I think when we
So I
release a lot of that shame and guilt that's around that, we start to learn what real intimacy is. And it's not always about just the act of sex, but it is about that intimacy of just laying together naked, or just, my husband and I do a routine where we do Reiki on one another, and then we sit in the bathtub and we eye gaze. And that's just something for us that we do, that we like to do, but there's no sexual aspect of that. And that takes
yeah,
sort of the what's the word I'm looking for? The pressure of it, I guess, out of it, because it's just a sacred space where we're both safe enough to experience that. But we've done also a lot of tremendous work around that shame and guilt that's afforded us the ability to do that, because
exactly.
the shame, and we go back to the shame and guilt again. If we have that shame and guilt, and I don't think it's healed perfectly, and it's different layers, so finding that true intimacy, I think first begins with you, and then it begins with you bringing that outwards with others.
You need to create that freedom within yourself to explore that, and that freedom within yourself to gift that to somebody, because I also think that that kind of presence is a present, um to be one to be stripped in front of someone, period, is a level of intimacy and trust you must be able to give, because our bodies are shamed. We're told to put clothes on. Everything is so shameful around the idea of sex, but it's a constant buildup, and I think that that kind of intimacy, you need to be comfortable with yourself too. Like, so many of us are not comfortable even looking at ourselves in the mirror. I've talked to so many women that don't even know what their vagina looks like. And I'm like, but men do? What? Like, how do you not know what she looks like?
Right? You don't have a clue.
And I think that is an intimacy, though, that you need to give yourself. It's a gift, And I think that that is a big way to start pulling shame out and start opening yourself for more intimate connections, but you need the freedom to do so. And with all of these layers and all of these taboos and all of these chains against it, there's no freedom. It's just shame. Even to connect with somebody emotionally in today's society, that automatically means that you want to have sex with them. Like, what?
Right.
You are so detached from intimacy. You're so craving it that's immediately what you think when someone has a connection with you.
Right. Or a deep, intricate connection, like with you and I. I mean, we created this connection. It was obviously past life. I mean, there was you can't describe it any other way. How we met and connected on the road 4 years ago. But,
It was definitely
those,
divine intervention.
yeah. And I think the more we bring this out and the more we talk about it, because I think talking about it is where we're going to bring awareness to it. And then it's not one and done for anybody. I always stress the importance of listening to what we have to say and bringing that liberation and truth to yourself, whatever that means for you. You're not going to clear all those layers of shame and
No,
guilt on every level at one moment. I find that through the work that I've done and the people that I've worked with, it's over time. But those experiences, and then it's almost like a test. Then you go out into the world and you see what you've healed, right? And then
exactly.
you're given a little rest period. And let's go back to you talking about the moon phases and the cycle phases. Again, another little rest period to integrate that. And then, okay, now we're back on it. We need to do work again. So even that
Exactly.
follows the cyclic movement, right?
Yeah, and when you're watching the cyclic movement within yourself, then you start to notice cyclic like cyclic natures of things what outside of yourself too, and you can notice good patterns that are happening with people and connections, and you can notice bad patterns with people and connections, and then use that energy to transmute it out of your body. And you can even use partners to do that. Like, there's so there's so many ways, because some people aren't able to achieve that release with themselves, because of their traumas and their layers. Sometimes they need someone guiding them through it or helping them through it. And there's all kinds of things now that are open to that, and they're teaching people that.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need the safety to even feel intimate with ourselves.
And that's sad. You
Hmm.
should feel the safest with yourself.
Right. But imagine being taught that yourself is not safe.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
sex is so healing, and sexual energy is so healing, and it gets bypassed and it gets taken advantage of, you know. You can see it within marriage too. You can see, like, even within myself, if it's been a while, I'm kind of irritable. And then, it's like,
And he's like, "What's
oh,
your
I like
problem?"
that. And then you're like, oh, I like you again. It's a release, it's a
For
connection,
today.
it's shared yeah, okay. It's a shared intimacy. And, like, even with manifestation and stuff, they're matching it with single pleasure and double pleasure. There's people out there having orgasms together and manifesting millions of dollars. It's, like, really happening. And then there's a lot of power behind it, and I think we can't explore those things unless we're open to talk about those things without shame.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else
Or
you'd
you
like
see
to add before we finish up?
um yeah, I would love to talk again later about the moon cycles, and if women are looking into that, I would suggest, starting with just educating themselves on the different cycles that you go through within the month, within your natural cycle, finding your cycle, and then tracking it, and just tracking small things. Start small. How do you feel? How do you like sex? Because sex even changes during your
Mhm.
cycle. During the maiden phase, you're all, like, cutesy and innocent, and you want to be lusted for. You want to be courted. You want to be pursued. And then in that mother phase, you want the nurturing, you want the snuggles, and you want the touches, and you want the softness. In your enchantress phase, you're wanting it rough, you're wanting it more playful. You might be more in control, you might be more of the initiator. And then when you're in your crone phase, you're like, get away from me, stop, no one touch me, I am touched out.
I don't
you
know
know
about that because I'm entering that phase and I still don't feel. I wonder if it'll ever end. I remember, like, my grandmother, my mother. God, I don't want to say it, but sex was yucky, and it was like,
yeah.
how's it? How's that even possible? But yeah, maybe we could do a show not only about us being in our phases, but what about the men that were with it? And they're also in their own phases. And I don't think that gets talked about enough, right? Because they have a
No.
lot of external pressures as well. I find with my husband, a lot of that external pressure begins here
Yep.
in this big, beautiful mind that he has. And that sort of flows with the
Imagination.
cycle as well.
I said their imagination, that powerful thing.
So I think, when you have the woman and then you have a guy, and you're both in these cycles, what does that really look like? Maybe we could talk about that next time because, you
Yeah,
may
and
not
how
be in the same at the same time.
exactly. And you have to take that into consideration, especially if you unconditionally love someone, and give them the freedom to find themselves again without the pressure of pleasuring you, you know,
Absolutely.
feeling the pressure of having to pleasure.
Yes.
I like that. I
So I
like
want
that.
to thank our beautiful listeners today to hanging out with us. I hope you enjoyed our talk about shame and sexuality. And I just want you to know that your sensuality, your sexuality is sacred. Your body is not a battlefield, and that your voice truly matters more than ever. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.